సార్ ఎంత నడుస్తుంది జూమ్ లైఫ్ లాంగ్
సార్ రాలే పంపిస్తున్నా ఒక్క 2 నిమిషాలు వేరే వస్తుంది.
స్టార్ట్ అవుతుందని
Come fast.
Good afternoon, Ashok sir.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Professor Ashok sir. I welcome you warmly to the second session of the national webinar on the emergence of multiculturalism in English language teaching, particularly generally in language teaching. So the presence of multiculturalism and the issues related to multicultural aspects of students and in relation to language teaching. And apart from that, how a teacher shall address those issues which are very much part of classroom environment linked to multiculturalism. Because the society is not what a unitary or what is a singular. So multiplicity is the very nature of Indian society. So particularly to address those issues which often perturb language teachers in addressing the issues of aspects of students, particularly when it comes to their culture. So we need to understand the mechanisms, intricacies, and the functionalities of culture in our classroom environment. So at the very outset, at the very outset, I request my colleague Kiran Chaitanya, lecturer in English, BRR Government Degree College, Jadcherla, Mahabubnagar district, to introduce keynote speaker for the session, Professor Dr. Ashok Garu, Usmania University. So I hand over the podium to Kiran Chaitanya. Here, Kiran Chaitanya.
One second. Finally, I invite you, Sir Dr. Ashok Sir, Assistant Professor, Department of English, and Additional Controller of Examinations, Usmania University. And he qualified MA, MPhil, PhD from OU. And he has 17 years of English language experience. He has 17 years of English language teaching experience and supervisor for ALT and American literature and Indian writing in English. And he wrote some articles. National and publications. Also, resource person for the and students, sir. So please express your feelings for the
Ashok sir, we await you, sir. We await your presence. Maybe some sort of technical glitches we are facing at present. Sir, we are waiting for you, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible, but voice
Hello.
is little bit
Am I
low,
audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible, but voice is little bit low.
Okay. Yeah, is it okay now?
Yeah,
Hello.
it is okay, sir. No problem. Just
Hello.
try
Can you
to
hear me,
what I say, increase the volume of the voice, sir.
Yeah, increased. It is already increased, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay. Carry on, sir. Carry on.
Oh, yeah. So, right.
Yes. It is audible, sir.
Hello.
It's quite audible.
Yeah. Good afternoon, one and all. It is already too late to join the webinar. As we all know that
Sir, Ashok sir.
Pardon. Yeah. Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Yeah. So shall I start now, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. So here the topic of our webinar is emergence of multiculturalism in teaching English language. As we all know that. Okay, sir. Is it okay?
It is okay now. It is okay now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So I wish to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And here our topic is emergence of multiculturalism in teaching English language. As and when we see the history of Indian English literature and the way how it has a colonial and post-colonial history, when you look at all these aspects of the Indian English literature and the role of the English language in transforming the idea of the colonial to post-colonial, making sense of the identity of the culture, language, history, social, political, economical, and cultural aspects of our third world country like India. As we all know that how language is part of our human life. Without language, we cannot communicate. And the way how we look at the language, not only for communication to each other, it is an expression of human sense, feeling, tone, and intention. So here, according to George Orwell, language is a political tool. Sir, is it audible, sir? Hello?
Yes, it is audible.
Hello,
Sir.
is it audible?
Yeah, it is audible,
Yeah.
sir.
Now, according to George Orwell, language is a political tool. How it defines the identity of an individual. Maybe it is our indigenous language, mother tongue, or that could be foreign tongue. So
Sir,
when you look at
sir,
the
phone,
when you look at the language as well as its usage in our day-to-day life, and when you look at the way how literature is making sense of the language, so here the emergence of the multiculturalism in teaching English language, making sense of multiple aspects of our Indian English literature. So when you go through all the whatever the colonial and post-colonial, whatever the literary genres of Indian English writing, there we can understand how this multiculturalism is with the conflict, collaborative and creative. Here, when you look at the conflict of the identity of the language, literature, and it has that kind of whatever the concerns of the human nature. So here we can understand that the role of the language has been trying to transform the socio-political, economical and cultural aspects, as well as the literature of our own culture. So when you look at the culture of our own, then we have multicultures in our Indian social scenario. As and when we have this kind of multicultures, multilingual ethnicity, and that could be any kind of thing which are into the religion, region, and the way how literature has been emerging to have the concerns of the people. So here in India, we have the unity in diversity. So how can we understand the unity in diversity, and why we need to have this kind of unity in diversity, and why we had the nationalism, and why we have to look at the multicultural whatever the concerns to teach the English language. So when you go through all these, then we can understand how here our topic is more relevant to our education system of the whatever the modernized concept of the technology. So when we are moving from colonial to post-colonial, as well as the traditional classroom to the technology classroom, then we are with these kind of whatever the gradual changes of the language as well as the literature. So here in terms of the literature, when you look at the colonial time of our Indian English literature, and it has the different names: Anglo-Indian, Indo-Anglian, as well as Indian writing in English, Indian English writing, as well as Indian literature in translation. So if you look at the whatever the different branded names of the Indian literature are all with this with the kind of whatever our concerns of the language of the indigenous, and here national language and foreign language like English. So when you look at the history of this kind of colonial time as well as the post-colonial, then you can see that kind of conflict with that kind of collaboration as well as the creativity of the literature. So here, if we look at our whatever the Indian English writing, then we should see that how it has the influence of the Marga, Deshi, as well as the Align. So if you go through the whatever the history of our colonial time, we had this kind of whatever the elements of the Marga, Deshi, as well as the Align, because here we were colonized by the British Empire, and we had that kind of richness of our culture and whatever the tradition, but they were ruined by the British Empire because of their whatever the education system. So when you look at these kind of background of this kind of the multicultural, multilingual concerns of the Indian English writing, then we can see how it has making sense of the multiculturalism to how that kind of its concerns to have to its whatever the establishment, and to influence the Indian English literature. So here we have that kind of richness of our own culture, tradition of our mother tongue, as well as the literature, maybe oral narratives, and here we have that kind of traditional whatever the cults which are with that kind of their concerns of the culture, tradition, or identity, or that could be religion, or that could be any kind of thing which is part of the human life, and which is making sense of the language, and it's that kind of identity of their own literature. So when you go through all these, then we have to look at that how Indian English writing had this kind of whatever its concerns to include, to have that kind of all these aspects to accept from the Marga, Deshi, and Align. So here my presentation will cover the part 1 and part 2 with the multiculturalism, and then ELT, that is English language teaching in our heterogeneous classroom. So why do we need to look at these two here? Because the way how literature through language, language through literature, to have our own whatever the culture, tradition, and identity, as well as the politics of writing. So when you look at all these, then we can understand how we have to have our own whatever the ethnicity, and that could be any kind of literature is making sense of all the aspects of our Indian writing English. So here when you look at all these, then we can understand the way to understand all these aspects from the way back to whatever the centuries of the 19th and 20th century. Then here we can see that the way how East West encounter, how it is making sense of East is the center of tradition and culture, or religion, or spirituality, or that could be any kind of richness of the language. So here we have that kind of universities like Takshashila and Nalanda universities, and the richness of the literature of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and other Panchatantra stories, Katha, Sarita, Sagara. There were many aspects which are treasure trove to our Indian literature. And when you are into this kind of regional language literature and the other aspects of our language, then we will see that how India has the richness, and it is a treasure trove, and it is mother of all the countries. And if you look at the role of the Sanskrit, significantly it has been making sense of its identity as a marga, and Sanskrit is the mother of all languages. So when you look at this kind of whatever the historical background of the Indian literature, then we have to look at that how multiculturalism is making sense of its whatever the concerns to have that kind of intercultural and multicultural education system, and to have that kind of whatever the promotion of individuality or individual culture. And here you look at the individual versus individualism. So when you look at all these aspects of this multiculturalism, then we can understand how multiculturalism had defined by the thinkers. Here multiculturalism is a system of beliefs and behaviors that recognizes and respects the presence of all diverse groups in an organization or society, acknowledges and values their socio-cultural differences, and encourages and enables their continued contribution within an inclusive cultural context, which empowers all within the organization or society. So here the reflection of Indian society is with this kind of multilingual, multicultural. Sir, is it audible, sir? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. It is clearly audible.
Yeah. So
Clearly audible, sir. One request,
yeah.
sir. One request. What do you say? Just what do you say? Keep the phone a little bit away from you, sir.
Oh yeah. Is it okay now?
It is okay. It is okay. Don't bring the phone near to you.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Right. So here, yeah. So the way how we have the definition of the multiculturalism, and how it has been inclusive of the individuals as well as different sections of the society, to have that kind of whatever the concerns of diversity, and whatever the unity in diversity. So when you look at all these, then we can understand how this multiculturalism has been opening the eyes of the multilingual and traditional cultural people to know that how it is the opening of the inclusiveness, and it always tries to have the kind of whatever the concerns of the organization of diverse groups, as well as the way how it is making sense of the society and the values, and here the way how we have to look at the socio cultural differences. So when we know about the multiculturalism, then we will see that how our whatever the literature is making sense of its identity to have the exposure of the multicultures, and the way to understand the individuality, and to have that kind of richness of the literature and the language, and to have that kind of whatever the concerns of the humanism. So when you look at that kind of all these elements of the multiculturalism, then one can understand how it is making sense of that whatever the concerns of the humanism, to understand how the people will have the self-respect, dignity, and towards an individual and others. So this is what you can see that how multiculturalism had this kind of collaboration, conflict, and creativity with cultural groups. So when we go through all these, then we can understand how it has this kind of background of its own. So here we'll come to the Indian English literature, that to understand how our colonial time literature had that kind of language of the foreign. Why not it is in a Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam or in a Gujarati language. So here when you look at the local towards it's whatever the cultural changes, and then you will remain as it is. But if you are going to have the language of the foreign, then we can see that the way how it is making sense of its cultural representation, traditional whatever the collaboration, and to have that kind of whatever the concerns of the Indian English literature. So here we will see that the way how Indian English literature had the kind of birth of skill, and it always tries to see that the way how all these aspects from the Marga, Deshi, and Align. So here the way how our education system had the touch of the whatever indigenous language. And as and when the British empire entered as a trader, and then our Indian education system had the transformation, and the way how we had that kind of reformation reforms in our Indian colonial time. And here in 1835, because of Lord Macaulay, our education system had the touch of the English language. So here when you look at the English language, what how and it helped us, how it included the indigenous people to have their whatever the marginal voices against the mainstream. So the education system was in ashrama system, Gurukula system, and the way how we had the social hierarchy to have the education, not to have, because of the caste system and social hierarchy. And then as and when the English subject had included in our education system, gradually there is there was a change in our education system to have that kind of inclusiveness with the whatever the education system, with the subjective knowledge, as well as its great elevation towards the global identity. So when we look at the turning point of our Indian education system, because of the Christian missionaries, as well as the way how British Empire had tried to uplift the indigenous people towards the education system, then the way how our Indian education system had liberated by the British Empire. So when you look at the East-West encounter of that contemporary age, then you can see the way how Sanskrit was the center of our education system. So when you look at these kind of whatever the historical background as Marga, Deshi, and Align, then we see that our British education system had the three language policy. And here, when you look at the Marga, Deshi, and Align, there you can see, you can understand that the conflict between the indigenous people as well as the mainstream culture or tradition or language. For instance, if you look at the Sanskrit versus Telugu or Tamil or South Indian languages or North East, or that could be any kind of part of the language of India, had this kind of conflict of the Marga versus Deshi. And here our culture tradition were toned because of these kind of Marga and Deshi, because of the conflict. And then we had that kind of influence of the Align. So here we have the education system of the three language policy, as well as the way how it has that kind of richness of its own to understand the politics of writing of our colonial writers during the 1920s and first before the First World War and after First World War. Then we can understand how our Indian English literature had the touch of these three elements of its richness, because here we need to look at that history of Indian English literature to have that kind of name of the Anglo-Indian, Indo-Anglian, and Indian writing in English, Indian English Indian literature in translation. So when you go through all these aspects, then we will see that how the language of the empire had transformed the identity of the culture tradition towards the global to receive the honors and rewards and name and fame. For instance, if you look at Rabindranath Tagore's Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, because of his whatever the contribution towards the Indian English writing, then you will see the way how it is the landmark for the gradual change in the Indian English literature. So when you look at 1913, before First World War, of Nobel Prize for Literature to Rabindranath Tagore, and 1982, our Salman Rushdie's Booker Prize, then you see that the way how it is the inclusiveness of the colonial and post-colonial, whatever the politics of language and literature, and you can understand how this multiculturalism had touched the all these aspects to understand from the lens of our Indian English literature. Here if we look at the Indian English literature from this kind of whatever the colonial and post-colonial point of view, that how this multiculturalism is with this kind of elements of the Marga, Deshi, and Align. Here my concerns are all part of the Indian English literature rather than American multiculturalism or any other. So here we look at the Indian tradition and culture with its exposure of whatever concerns towards the global literature, as well as if you look at all these aspects of that time, then we can see that literary tradition of the Gujarati, Tamil, and Marathi are that kind of Deshi tradition. So the way how the literary tradition of the Telugu, Tamil, or Marathi, all the indigenous languages had the Deshi tradition rather than the Marga or Align, because we do not know that the Sanskrit as well as the English. So before that we had the richness of our language and literature way back to centuries of that age. Here in 13th century, Amir Khusro as well as Jagannath Pandit, they had their whatever the concerns of the humanism as well as tradition culture in their writings. So the way how that literature keep on changing its identity and keep on changing its language to promote its identity towards the global level. So this is what here you can see that how our Indian writing English literature has its multicultural whatever the concerns. It is not that only American literature or other whatever the branches of the knowledge or uh, departments had the multiculturalism. It has that kind of richness in our own language of India as well as the literature of our own. Then you can see that the way how the Indian writers like A.K. Ramanujan, Jayanta Mahapatra, Sri Aurobindo, and here Raja Rao Parthasarathi. So when you Rajagopala Parthasarathi, so here when you look at all these, whatever the writers had that kind of concerns of not only the language and culture, tradition, and how different genres emerged in Indian writing, Indian English writing, to say that the way how it is making sense of all these all aspects of our whatever the metaphorically speaking the body of modern Indian culture. So this is what we can understand how the Indian English writing had the richness of its own from Deshi, Marga, and Align. So here one can understand how the way back to centuries cultural and traditional representation of the India had the touch of the Sanskrit language, and how it has that kind of culture and modernization, and here it produced the traditionalized whatever the concerns of Indian culture. So this is what one can understand how Indian literature in English is the assimilation of an aligned context of colonial times. So here when you look at the whatever the aspects of this multiculturalism in relation to the Indian English literature, then we can see that how Indian literature in English is the assimilation of an aligned language, and how it contextualizes the context, how it was the context of the colonial time. And when you look at the whatever the historical background of this, we had aspects of imitation of the British and upsurge of revivalist tendency. So when you look at the way how a silence of untold stories and untouched whatever the history was had that kind of imitation as well as the upsurge of the revivalist tendency. So here when you look at the combating forces and conflict as well as the collaboration and creativity of this Marga, Deshi, and Align, then we had that kind of whatever the aspects of Indian English literature with the Sanskritization and Westernization. So here we should see that the way how it has the kind of upsurge of revivalist tendency, as well as the imitation of British because of the colonization and invaders, and how our business had a kind of whatever the aspects of the colonized elements as well as its concerns. So here when we look at this Sanskritization and Westernization of our whatever the concerns of the Indian English literature, then we can see that how Sanskrit and the culture embodied in it, and it has been playing up an ancient wise parent. So here when you look at that kind of whatever the aspect of the medium of instruction of the indigenous languages, and as well as in national language as well as international language, then we can see that the way how this Sanskritization and Westernization were institutionalized and in modern Indian culture and literature. So when we look at this kind of historical background of the Indian English literature, then we can see that the way how there was a gradual change in its existential reality. So this is what we can see the way how it was institutionalized, and in through the modern Indian culture and literature. And here how Sanskrit is a representation of culture, tradition, and how it had that kind of embodied aspect of its significant role to say that it is our ancient wise parent. So here the way how this kind of Sanskritization and Westernization had institutionalized. So when we look at the modern Indian language and the culture and literature, were given to the role of a child. So we see the way how Sanskrit produced this kind of whatever the Indian language and culture literature are the children of that wise parent of the Sanskrit. So when we look at this kind of whatever the historical background of Indian English literature, and making sense of the multicultural identities of the Deshi, Marga, and Align, then we can understand how it has that kind of richness of the language, culture and literature to produce the children of its own. So this is what here the way how the child of the Sanskrit then it has a kind of imitation of the parent. Here we look at the writers like Sri Aurobindo's Savitri and Raja Rao's Serpent and the Rope are the reflections of this kind of parent-child relationship. So this is what here the mythological, supernatural, and cultural traditional elements were interwoven with this kind of Indian English literature to say that the Sanskrit is the mother of all languages, and how it has this kind of whatever the role of parent and the production of the language, culture, and literature as a children of its own. So this is what we can see how this is the way to understand multiculturalism in Indian English literature, how it produced the new whatever the power or strength or to literature to survive on its own. Otherwise we would not have survived, because here we had that kind of the richness of the Deshi and Marga and align. So here when you look at the local, global, as well as the way how we have to understand indigenous languages as well as national languages and international languages. So when it has been internalized, and when it has been that kind of whatever the collaboration and with the creativity, then it has that kind of Sanskritization and Westernization to understand the multiculturalism as an opening of new invention as well as new strength to Indian English literature. So this is what one can understand how we have to look at the multiculturalism as a concept of the multilingual language and inclusiveness of its whatever the organization and the way to promote the individuality as well as culture tradition towards the global concerns. So here when you look at the identity and of the culture tradition, then it has the kind of whatever it's Sanskritization and Westernization or modernization. So here we have the a tripatriate cultural combined, that is nothing but here the indigenous and that is Deshi and Marga, that is national, and international, that is aligned, is here English language. So here when you look at the all whatever the aspects of this multiculturalism of Indian English literature, then we can see that the way to understand the colonial and post-colonial literature of our Indian English writing and our literature, then we had that kind of touch of its own identity politics as well as the Indian writing English of concerns. Then we can understand how our writers had the touch of multiple aspects, as well as the way to understand how this multiculturalism culturalism has been enabling us to understand the politics of writing as well as the language to have its concerns. So when you look at all these, then we can understand the way to how this kind of multiculturalism in Indian writing English to say that it has that kind of richness as well as it's whatever whatever the inclusiveness of its own. So here when we look at all these aspects of the multiculturalism, then the way to understand how English had that kind of from the personal to political, or self to society. So like that, here we have this kind of aspect of our Indian English literature to understand that tripatriate in cultural relationship, which determines the course of Indian literature in English, can be seen at work in a large number of writers, particularly those given to self-examination. So here we look at the way how the self is interpreted in terms of the Deshi, Marga, and align. So if you look at way back to centuries of our history as well as culture and tradition had that kind of touch of transformation, and here Sanskritization or Westernization, or that could be any kind of thing. So here, as an individual, we look at that the way how self-examination is making sense of our identity politics of the colonial time or post-colonial time. So here, when we have this kind of whatever concerns of the self, then we will examine where am I, what am I, how am I, and the way how to establish myself. So this is what here the self-examination in terms of the language and the literature. For instance, one of the poets of our Indian writing in Indian English writing. Here Parthasarathi, who wrote a poem called From Homecoming, and here it was an extract from the rough passage. As and when he left India for higher education to foreign, then he lost his mother tongue, and he is longing to come back to his motherland. Then the way how it has that kind of whatever the anxiety, as well as identity, as well as schizophrenic nature of the foreign land as well as the motherland. So here it is not only the land, it is the language of media, and it is the language of one's identity and individuality. So when you look at the poem called Home From Homecoming by Parthasarathi, there we can see that how he had tried to look at the poem from the self-examination. So here the poem had started first line of the stanza, first stanza. Here I am no longer myself as I watch the evening blur the traffic to a pair of obese headlights. So here, as and when you look at the self-examination, and the emphasis of I always is looking at the way where he was, how he was, and how he lost his identity of the language. So when he says that the way his tongue is in English changed, so he is no more an Indian because of the English language, and the way how it deals with the identity, anxiety, and schizophrenia, and the way how he had that kind of touch of the exile, trial, and homecoming. So when you look at the poem from this kind of self-examination, then the way how identity politics of the society or culture or tradition, then we have to look at that self versus society. So in multiculturalism, you will see this kind of whatever the reference of the From Homecoming by Parthasarathi to look at that kind of exile, trial, homecoming, and here identity, anxiety, and schizophrenia. There you can see the way how Deshi, Marga, and Align are all making into this kind of identity politics. So when you go when we look at all these the way how Indian English literature had this kind of richness of self as an individual as well as the society. So here the style of Indian literature in English shows clear signs of this compulsion. For instance, even after writing for one for more than half a century, here we look at the writers like Mulkaj Anand and R.K. Narayan have that kind of whatever the regional concepts are, and terms into neutral English. So this is what you look at the way how the colonial time of the Indian English writing, Indian English literature in Anglo-Indian, in Indo-Anglian are all from this kind of background to understand that multiculturalism with this kind of whatever the inclusiveness of the Deshi, Marga, and Align to understand that kind of conflict, collaboration, and creativity of our whatever the Indian English literature. So when we look at all these, then we can understand how our Indian language, it is more learned than spoken in India, and to that extent it is a static language. So here you look at the way how the mainstream language making sense of power politics of the society. So there you can see how English as a language of a subversion, language of elites. Here we have the E elites, N national, and G global, and L linked, and I Indian, and S spoken, and H honor. So here, when you look at each and every letter of the English, then it is making sense of its identity politics, not only in literature, it is in society also. So when you look at the way how it was with this kind of stand of the static and the status, so always it has that kind of status go, as well as it is static. There is no any kind of gradual whatever the change. It has that kind of staticness to establish its identity of its Indian English, whatever the literature. So for instance, if you look at in Nisam Jadcherla's poems known as the Indian English poems, so there we can see that ambivalence pervades the reproduction of somewhat comical but truly Indian use of English. So here we have that kind of whatever the aspect of that kind of staticness in its existence of the Indian English literature. For instance, the other example of is here Arbindo's Savitri, a long poem, an epic poem, and written in Miltonic diction, replete with references to the stylized folklore of the ancient past. So here, the way how it has that kind of richness of the epic and the use of the English language, and here how it was legitimized as a national language. So this is what here, when you look at this kind of background of the multiculturalism and how internationalization of its identity, and here we can see that the way how the whatever the three language formula, as well as the elements of Marga, Deshi, and Align are all with this kind of existential reality of the contemporary age. So when you look at all these aspects of the Indian English literature, then we can understand how the social context of our whatever the Indian English literature, then how it had that kind of whatever the culture and tradition, and the way to understand all these aspects of richness of the language and literature with multiple aspects. So this is what one can understand how the multiculturalism had this kind of whatever the background of our own Indian English literature, as well as its concerns. And then we can see that how our whatever the cultural stance and the literary forces emerging into our whatever the cultural and traditional orientations. So here the multicultural context of Indian literature in English produces the following predictable styles of writing. So here one is a style in which internationalism and nationalism meet and collaborate, where the aligned cultural features work together with the Marga cultural features. In fiction, the ideal example of this trend is Raja Rao, waiting for Mahatma, and who combines an international sort of existentialism with a national sort of sentimentality. So here, when we look at the multicultural context of Indian literature in English, is making sense of its whatever the style with the national and international concerns. Here we have Raja Rao, one of the writers of this kind of background, and the second one is Marga cultural features merge with the local or Deshi. So that is what here Sanskrit is blended with the indigenous languages. So here the second aspect of the multicultural context of Indian literature in English shows that one is internationalization with the national language, say here nationalism. There we can see the writer of our Indian literature in English, Raja Rao. And then the second aspect of this is Marga cultural features merge with the local or Deshi cultural features, or with this kind of whatever its identity of the language, as well as the culture and tradition. So when we look at all these of whatever the English with this kind of whatever the adaptations in literature, then we can see that one of the novelists, Pratap Sharma's novel on Punjab, The Day of the Turban. So here, when we look at the way how the first aspect of the multicultural context in Indian literature in English, national to international. The second one is having that kind of marga culture features merging with deshi, and this one is the second, and the third one is international cultural features conflict with the national or marga features. So here, when we look at the conflict, collaboration, and creativity concerns of the multicultural, always English is making sense of that kind of male domination, and the Indian is female domination, female concern. And here it always contradicts with the marga as well as the deshi. So here, when you look at all these, then you can see that the way how one of the writers, Mukraj Anand's usual style belongs to this type. So here he is contradicting with the national and international. So when you look at this third style of the multicultural context of Indian literature in English, how Mulraj Anand had this kind of cultural features, and how he emerged with this kind of whatever the aspects of its conflict of the marga against the national, that is aligned culture. So here, when you look at the marga versus deshi, and marga deshi versus the aligned, that is international language. The fourth one is here we have the national and regional. The marga and the deshi cultural features are at cross cross purposes. So here we have the writer like R.K. Narayan at times seems to be facing this problem. So here each and every style of the multicultural context of the Indian literature in English shows that around the deshi, marga, and align, and how the writers too had the kind of touch of their own language, culture, and tradition, and whatever their concerns from local to global. So when you look at local versus global in Indian English literature with this kind of multicultural context, then we can understand how the writers of the contemporary age had this kind of in-depth knowledge of their deshi and marga as well as align, and to understand how it is making sense of the multicultural concerns of the Indian literature in English. So this is what we can understand how the way how these three cultures originate in an agrarian, a feudal, and an industrial society respectively. So here we can see that the way how these three cultures are all into this whatever in its conflict, collaboration, and creativity, to understand how the politics of writing, and to have that kind of its whatever the identity. For instance, in here we can see, metaphorically speaking, the body of modern Indian culture is drop in ancient shoes, a medieval gown, and a modern hat. So when we look at the way back to whatever the centuries of the colonial time, then we can see that the modern whatever the concern had this kind of hat and medieval gown and ancient shoes. So here we are trying to look at the west from this kind of deshi, marga, and align, to have our own whatever the culture, tradition, language with a modern hat. So here we can see that the way how this kind of whatever the Sanskritization, westernization, and institutionalization, because of the politics of this literature. So when we look at all these, we can understand how the way to look at the Indian literature in English from this kind of background, to know how to have our own cultures from this kind of whatever the pragmatics of history, social, political, economical, and cultural backgrounds. So here, when you look at the way how the writers emerged to look at the global concerns, and to have institutionalization, internalization, and to have that kind of identity of their own. So here we you can see that the way how multiculturalism in Indian literature in English with this kind of concerns of its own. So here when we go through all these, then we can understand how multiculturalism is the opening of multiple aspects of language, tradition, culture, and how it breaks the monoculture, or that kind of autonomy of the master's language. For instance, if we look at Shakespeare's Tempest, there Caliban, and the way he counter argues with Prospero. So here the way that kind of colonized language empowers the colonized people. So here Caliban argues with Prospero.
Sir, sound వినిపిస్తలేదు సార్. సౌండ్ అశోక్ సార్, సౌండ్ తగ్గింది.
Yeah. Okay. So here,
Now it is okay. Now it is okay.
The way to look at the a significant role of language as a political tool by George Orwell, then we can see that kind of power politics of its existential reality in terms of the language, in terms as well as the literature, to have that kind of exposure of our own, and whatever the concerns of the inclusiveness of our identity politics. So when we look at all these as well as politics, and way to look at its identity from this kind of multicultural background. So here, when we look at all these, then we can understand how the way to look at the multiculturalism as a discourse, with this kind of conflict, collaborative, and creativity, to have that kind of social practices. So when we look at the way how here as a discourse, with this kind of knowledge through language, it's a production of knowledge through language. So here
video is not visible, sir.
Yeah. Now is it okay?
Yeah. Now video is visible and voice is audible.
Yeah. Audible, sir. Yeah. Fine. So here, if you look at the way how these kind of concerns of the history and the language literature of the Indian English literature, there we can see how the power relation, with this kind of establishment of the identity of the language and the literature. So here Foucault says that there is no power relation without the correlative constitution of a field of knowledge, nor any knowledge that does not presuppose and correlative constitution, time, power, and here relations. So here, when you look at knowledge is life, ignorance is death, like that, the way how it is making sense of all these aspects of whatever the Deshi, Marga, and align cultures of this kind of background. So here, when we look at the multiculturalism, in terms of the language and the literature, and the way to have that kind of concerns of the inclusiveness from local to global, there we can see liberal multiculturalism and non-liberal multiculturalism. Here, liberal multiculturalism is looking at the way how an individual will make use of the culture for his development, or promotion, or it's whatever the concerns of the modernization. And here liberal multiculturalism always with this kind of whatever the power of its own to elevate local to global. And here, when we look at that kind of cultural identity of the liberal multiculturalism, there the way how culture is the backbone of the development of an individual. And here the non-liberal says that one should not use the culture for one's development, for one's identity politics. So here the non-liberal multiculturalist says that nothing but art for art's sake, culture for culture's sake, but not for human sake. So here, when you look at the contradictory between the liberal multiculturalists and non-liberal multiculturalists, there we can see that kind of whatever the concerns of the multiculturalism to promote the identity of an individual from the culture and tradition, as well as from that kind of language of its existential politics. So here, when we look at all these, then we can understand how Indian English literature had this kind of touch of richness to understand that kind of individual voice. And it's combating collaborative and conflict elements of Deshi, Marga, and Align to promote its identity towards the global level. So the way how it has this kind of aspects of the multiculturalism from the way back to centuries, as well as its concerns to look at the language and literature from the Indian historical point of view. So this is we can see the way how India had that kind of touch of this kind whatever the all isms like here multiculturalism, individualism, or that could be any kind of ism had that kind of touch of its identity politics. So this is what here we can see the way how this multiculturalism had that kind of politics of its own into its language and literature. So here, when we look at all these aspects of this multiculturalism with this kind of historical background, then we can understand that how it is pluralistic, as well as a new with this kind of whatever the invention and inclusive nature, and it always promotes that kind of common culture with that kind of individual participants, and how it is with this kind of whatever the desirable of an individual to promote himself into that kind of common culture. So here so far I had tried to cover the richness of the language, literature, culture, tradition of the Indian English literature through the Deshi, Marga, and Align, and then we'll see
Ashok sir, voice become inaudible.
Is it okay for now?
Voice. Now it is okay, sir.
Yeah. So here, we look at the way second part of this presentation with the language, use of the English language in our Indian classroom. So the role of the Indian classroom teacher with this kind of traditional background of the culture, tradition, or that could be any kind of thing of the Deshi, Marga, or Align. So the way how we look at the role of the English teacher in a heterogeneous class to have that kind of medium of communication and to promote the students' individuality with that kind of whatever the common concerns, as well as the way to have their whatever the global concerns. So here, when we look at the Indian classrooms with the heterogeneous background, then the whatever the challenges of our Indian English teachers are all from different whatever the aspects. If we look at, then we will see that the way to have the students concerned English language teaching rather than traditional or or exclusion of the students. So here, when we look at the English language with the multicultural concerns, then we will see that how teacher is is the center of the classroom to promote their whatever the language from local to global, and to have that kind of individuality, and to have their concerns of the common, as well as unity in diversity, and the way how we have to motivate them to have that kind of whatever their attitude and aptitude to change as a good human beings with the humanism, good Samaritans. So when we look at these kind of aspects, the teacher should have that kind of concerns of his own to look at the way how one should be a teacher of English language and literature in a classroom like heterogeneous. And there we can see that kind of multilingual and multicultural students from whatever their concerns of the language learning, and having that kind of target as well as outcome based education system. So here, the teachers should have the kind of common sense, awareness, and they should pay attention to cultural differences of that kind of whatever the multilingual and multicultural. And here they have to the teachers have to accommodate, facilitate the students to their ground reality. And the way here we have to sensitize to have that kind of traits of the body language. So when we look at the body language of the target learners as well as the teacher should be with that kind of unity, with that kind of tune and sensitiveness. So here the teacher should be reasonable to high level of understanding of issues. For instance, here we have the 21st century skills, critical, creative, and collaborative, and we have that kind of competency of the language. So when you look at the way how communication skills are all part of our English language teaching, if we do not, if we lack any one of the 21st century skills, for instance, Bloom's taxonomy, higher level and lower level, if we are not having that kind of exposure of the continuous professional development, we will be the failed subjectivities. So when we look at the second part of the English language teaching, in terms of the multiculturalism, then we will see that as an individual teacher to have this kind of continual professional development to uplift the students from local to global, gutter to great heights, then only we will see that to have that kind of collaborative creativity communication with the students from different backgrounds. So here the students expects something from the English language teacher to have that kind of personality development and employability skills, and that could be whatever their concerns. So here they are looking at the whatever the outcome based education from the learner point of view, from the teacher, so by the teacher. So when we look at this kind of ELT from the multiculturalism point of view, then the teacher should be with this kind of overall development of the mind and body. And here the teachers should have that kind of whatever the aspects of all the our personality as a teacher, with the internal and external cleanliness, and the kind of body language, and there should be speaking skills, and there should be that kind of memory power, and that kind of writing skills, and the way how we have to look at the other aspects of our teaching profession, willingness to learn, and the way how here we have to have that kind of humility towards the students, learner centered exposure. So when we look at these 9 aspects of our teaching profession, or here with this kind of whatever the overall development of our students from the learner center point of view. So here when we look at the aspects of our teacher point of view, then one should
ఇదేం
have
ఆన్లైన్ అక్కడ మన సెమినార్ జరుగుతా ఉంది, నేను ఇక్కడ నుంచి వింటున్నాను. చెప్పు.
Yeah.
ఏం లేదు.
Here we have to self-examine, like Parthasarathi examined his tongue is in English chains. Am I good at looking my external appearance, and here the body language and presentation, and the way to have that kind of content based task based language literature teaching, or different genres of Indian English literature, or that could be anthology of poetry from Afro-American or Indian writing English, or Indian Anglo-Indian, or Indian English writing, or Canadian or Caribbean literature. So here from different sources, if we have this kind of collaborative creativity of task based teaching in a classroom with this kind of multiculturalism, then we will see the way how English teacher will enable the learner centered outcome based education to promote the learner as an individual to that kind of global level, to have that kind of employability skills. So when you look at the Bloom's taxonomy or 21st century skills or continuous professional development with this kind of background, then we will try to see that how the teacher should be in a classroom of English language teaching, and as an individual, and as a professional teacher. So here when we look at the multiculturalism with the ELT, then we can see that the overall development of our academic success as an individual growth of all students. So this is what here we have to provide the equal opportunities to all the students, irrespective of their caste, whatever the other backgrounds of the students from different backgrounds. So here when we look at that way how functional in cross-cultural settings, so we should have this kind of multicultural competency, and that kind of whatever the aspects which we will see through the literature, and the way how we have to establish that kind of multiculturalism in our day-to-day classroom in English language teaching. So here when we look at all these, then we can understand how it always tries to expose the individuals from local to global, and as well as we look at the whatever our internalization and that kind of any kind of attitude of change. For instance, people are talking about soft skills, communication skills, content writer, accent trainer, and here we will see the way how English has been branded with this kind of whatever the names, business English, official language, and library language. So each and every age has been transforming the Indian English literature and the language. Then we will see that how it will exposed towards this kind of multiculturalism. For instance, Chetan Bhagat's 24 hours in a call center. So when we look at the way back to centuries literature, as well as the current or recent trends in Indian English literature, then we will see that there are changes from conventional to unconventional. And with this kind of multiculturalism, we will see that to promote our students towards local, from local to global level. So when we look at the all the aspects of our whatever the concerns of the internal and external cleanliness, and the body language, and the whatever the speaking skills, as well as our memory power, and that kind of boldness, and here we look at that kind of handwriting, as well as that kind of whatever our concerns of the willingness to learning. So here when we look at the Sanskrit words, Suchi, Vachasvi, Varchasvi, Dhruti, Smuti, Kruti, Namrata, Utsahi, and Jignasa. So here the 9 aspects of our profession should be should be included in our whatever day-to-day life, to have the exposure of an individual teacher towards the global level, to promote our students from classroom to the whatever the cultural changes, or that competitive world which always tries to question where you are, how you are. For instance, in our English newspaper, the military advertisement challenges them. Do you have it in you, the whatever the confidence, or daring dashing personality to join the army? So the way, if you look at the advertisement, how it injects that kind of positiveness, attitude of change, to have that kind of daring and dashing personality, to promote ourselves from local to global, to join the not only Indian Army, or that could be any kind of competitive world, to have the employment. So when we look at the role of the teacher, not only to teach the language learning skills, to promote them to have the employability skills, and to have that kind of equal opportunities, and to have that kind of whatever the equal concerns of humanism, rather than the elitism. So here English does not produce it should produce the equality rather than the elitism. So it should not produce that kind of inequality. It should produce the equality among the students. As an English teacher, it should be inclusive rather than compartmentalizing the students in the name of the different backgrounds of their family or society. So here it should be inclusive with this kind of multicultural exposure, to understand that kind of whatever the approaches, methods, and techniques to teach the poem of Indian writer, Indian poet, or African American poet. For instance, in Ole Soyinka's telephone conversation, there you will see the racism between a landlady and a man from this kind of racial background. So here, when we look at that kind of transformation of the students in the English language teaching, then the role of teacher promotes towards the higher level of language learning as well as teaching, and from this kind of whatever the concerns of the all the aspects of the multiculturalism. So when we look at the way how it is making this kind of sense of the multiculturalism in Indian English language teaching, as well as its concerns to promote the equality, inclusiveness, and that kind of humanism to towards the future of the youth, as well as the Indian education system. So when we look at all these, then we will see that the way how we have to have that kind of all the aspects of our human diversity, and with this kind of whatever the cultures, as well as traditions, from this kind of multicultural point of view, to promote our societies towards the humanism, to have that kind of concerns of individuals, as well as the group of people, or cultures together with that kind of whatever the inclusiveness. So when we look at all these, then we can understand how this multiculturalism is purposeful and relevant to the contemporary society, and the way how the recent trends of the Indian education system shows that the way how the challenges of the employment, as well as the whatever the other aspects of the education system are all in doldrums, with this kind of whatever the identity crises of an individual, and the way how challenges, issues are all looking at the individual, with this kind of whatever the concerns of the multiculturalism, to promote as an inclusive individual, rather than an exclusive identity crisis person. So here, when we look at all these, then we have to have that kind of attitude and aptitude of change, with this kind of whatever the soft skills, and the way to look at the lower and higher level skills of the Bloom's taxonomy, their problem solving, and team building, and the idea crisis management, or the way to have that kind of whatever the collaborativeness in our institution, so that we can see that how this multiculturalism is part of our everyday teaching life. So here we can see that how the way to understand the humanism, as a good Samaritan, a philanthropist, who can transform the society from whatever the challenges and issues towards the global identity, global concerns, as well as that kind of humanism, to have that kind of reflections of the equality as well as individuality. So I think I have covered part 1 and 2 with these multicultural emergence of multiculturalism, as well as the teaching English language in our day-to-day life of our Indian education system. So shall I, sir? Shall I stop here? Hello.
Sir, you can, sir. If you have finished your talk, you can, or else conclude.
Yeah. So I wish to conclude with this. Whatever the opportunities of local and global should be transformed towards that kind of equality and humanism, to have concerns of the liberty, equality, and fraternity among the people of India, as well as other parts of the world also. So here it is it is a reflection of the multiple aspects of whatever the concerns of the multiculturalism, as well as there is a requirement of this humanism in the name of the whatever the egalitarian society. So when we look at all these, then we can understand how this multiculturalism making sense of our Indian English literature, as well as in English language teaching, with the all the concerns of the humanism. I thank the organizers here, principal of this college, and the coordinator, co-coordinator, and the technical staff of this college. Provided me the opportunity, and I wish to thank one and all. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, before going for the vote of thanks, I want to summarize what Professor Ashok sir shared his insights on multiculturalism with us. He began his speech by referring Indian English literature, and he explained the nexus, the connection between literature and language. Because nowadays, English teachers particularly, they tend to think that language is different and literature is different. And when we see our prescribed texts for our classroom teaching, there also literature is slowly and steadily losing its significance and its space across the pages. And language aspects like grammar, vocabulary, dialogue writing, summaries, all those things are occupying more and more pages. So literature and language entwined with each other. So we have to understand the importance of literature in language teaching. That's what Professor Ashok sir wanted to share with us. And he states his opinion regarding colonial and post-colonial times. So language, English language, emerged in India initially as a colonial language with the tendencies of suppression, with the tendencies of superiority, and showing the other, or showing the Orientals as inferior to Occidentals. So, but now the scenario has been changed. In post-colonial era, in globalization, language, according to Professor Ashok sir, language has given rise to identities. So they are called language identities. So we are identified with the language which we speak, which we use in our day-to-day parlance. So it is our responsibility to equip with our students good understanding of the language. And we have to make students aware of the fact that language is nothing to do, particularly English language is nothing to do with oppression, nothing to do with any influence of Britain or America or something else. And Professor Ashok sir stated that English language symbolizes diversity, because across the globe, diverse people started to use English language in their day-to-day communication. If you want to speak to a person who is sitting in Iceland from India, you need a common language that is English language. So English language has become a bridge across the cultures, that what Professor sir wanted to say. And he shed much light on multicultural aspects of Marga, Desha, and Align. And he gave importance to mother tongue. And he stated that, and he proposed that local narratives must be given due importance in imparting language skills to our students. Because if local narrative is a big part of culture, ignoring cultural narrative is killing the very soul of the culture. So we have to give importance, we have to give enough validity to local narratives. Local narratives means what how culture is getting expressed. It would be expressed in stories, it would be expressed in dialects, it would be expressed in anecdotes, it would be expressed in exemplums. So in imparting understanding, a teacher must be aware of these intricacies of languages, in these intricacies of culture. And at the same time, we have to focus on the, what I say, aspect of identity formation, because culture and language are the two important essential qualities which exist in an individual to continue the process of individuation. So in the formation of identities, both literature and language play crucial role, and literature is full of local narratives. When we take, what I say, Marga Deshi literatures, so we have to revere the significance of that local narratives. And Ashok sir, Professor Ashok sir, he, what I say, upheld the concept of what I say, personal to political, and he, what I say, referred Parthasarathi, so what I say, the concept of I. And when Parthasarathi says, what I say, I identity becomes no more Indian, because there is a vein of exile and trial in Indian English literature. And also R.K. Narayan, Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Narayan, was referred in his speech. We know Rasipuram Krishnaswamy Narayan from Swami and Friends, 1935 to 1957, The Guide, English Teacher, and many wonderful novels he has written. And R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, Mulkraj Anand, these three people, they shaped early, what I say, Indian English literature, just before the independence and just after the independence. Their, work span across around, what I say, 30 to 40 years in Indian English literature. And Professor Ashok sir, he cited existentialism. Existentialism, what I say, it seeks, the definition of existentialism is, what I say, existence precedes essence. Means how we are determines the nature of our existence. Means the nature of existence actually guides the future course of life. So one cannot escape the nature and fundamentals of existence. And what I say, actually, what I say, wonderfully, Dr. Ashok sir, he quoted Jean-Paul Sartre's phrase, that is, sentence, that is, existentialism is humanism. Yes, humanism means Manavatavadam. Humanism, Jean-Paul Sartre says that humanism, existentialism is humanism. Means if you want to respect and propagate the values of humanism, we have to respect and evaluate existence. And culture is the foremost part, what I say, undeniable part of, what I say, culture, existence. So these two things, existence, humanism, as English teachers, as language teachers, we have to understand the what I say, modalities of these two tendencies which are present in our classroom, in order to give our optimum to our students, our optimum efficacy to our students. And really, sir, it is actually, what I say, wonderful thing. And you have quoted Gugiwa Thiago, Vol Soyinka, and Gugiwa Thiago, he is the revolutionary concept. And he says that, what I say, without decolonizing your mind, you cannot colonize yourself. That's why he wrote Decolonizing the Mind. Because until your mind is free of those oppressive elements which are sown by the alien forces in our psyche, we are not going to get emancipated ourselves from the clutches of bondage. So culture, multiculturalism, respecting the existence of multicultural values, multicultural tradition is the need of the hour. And as we English teachers must imbibe in ourselves these qualities. Wonderful, sir. Ashok sir, thank you very much, Professor Ashok sir. And
Thank you.
sir, wait, sir. I asked my principal, madam, Dr. Appiya Chinnamma, madam, whether she is ready. Whether she is ready because she was busy. Madam, Appiya Chinnamma, madam, my principal, madam, Dr. Appiya Chinnamma, madam. I humbly invite my madam to address the audience and the gathering. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I felt very happy about the national webinar conducted by the English department. I really thanks to our eminent resource persons, Professor Manoja Garu and Dr. Ashok Garu, Assistant Professor of English from Osmania University, about for giving an excellent coverage about the multiculturalism, its importance, and how it will be useful for the students. My blessings and thanks to my dear students for your unwavering attention for the session. I thank you very much, Mr. Narahari Murthy Garu, HOD of the English department, and other staff members for their efforts to complete the national seminar organization in very smooth and fascinated way. I remain grateful to you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I invite, thank you, madam. Thank you very much for interacting with us and giving your message, my principal, madam. And now I invite my colleague Abhinaya Garu to propose a vote of thanks. Now, Abhinaya.
Honorable dignitaries, distinguished guests, respected principal madam, and dear participants, on behalf of Government Degree College Jadcherla and organizing committee, I would like to take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. Firstly, I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Professor G. Manoja Madam, head of the department at Palmer University, for her wonderful and informative session on today's topic. Thank you, Madam. And I would further extend a heartfelt thanks to keynote speaker to Dr. Ashok Sir, Additional Controller at Osmania University, for his thought-provoking insight. Thank you, sir. Next, I take this opportunity to specially express my deep regard and gratitude to our beloved principal ma'am, C.H. Appiya Chinnamma madam, for always encouraging us and providing opportunity to organize such events. And my sincere gratitude goes to P. Narahari Murthy sir, head of the department, for taking topics that really matters in today's age and time. And my deep sense of appreciation and thanks to all the participants who choose to be live with us and attend the webinar to create enthusiasm and make it successfully. And I also thank all the teaching and non-teaching staff and organizing committee members, B. Madhavi Madam, lecturer in English, and S. Kiran Chaitanya, for their unfaltering support. Last, but surely not the least, I thank P. Vijay Kumar sir, assistant professor in political science, and Nandakishore sir, lecturer in political science, and Pratap sir for all the technical support and for helping us to webcast or webinar through our YouTube head. Once again, I thank you all for being with us today and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I hereby formally declare that webinar has been successfully completed, and I am very much thankful to you, sir, personally, Ashok sir, for your what I say. You have readily accepted our invitation, and thank you very much, because you are what I say, holding the responsibilities of additional examination controller there. So it is a busy assignment for you. Yet you what I say have taken some time for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Thank you, sir.
And I request all the audience to fill up the feedback forms so that we can send the certificates as early as possible. Thank you. Thank you very much.